is my fibromyalgia going to get worse? Am I going to get disabled from it? And it's a great question because there's a lot of misinformation out there that's based on outdated model and understanding of fibromyalgia and based on outcomes and seeing outcomes from an environment where people aren't being treated properly, where the main treatment is just symptomatic to try to reduce the symptoms. I'm going to bring this mic closer here. So this is a big problem. This is related more than just to fibromyalgia. So if you got fibromyalgia, chronic pain, depression, anxiety, other chronic illness, autoimmune disease, there's a common theme, which is that by and large, clinical medicine is decades behind the basic research, and doctors are slow to catch up with the research. And there's reasons for that, and it's not a bad thing necessarily. But when somebody's got a syndrome that is profound, causes profound suffering and potentially disability, then to me, from my values, it means, well, let's think about what's really going on here and try to understand it. And we don't necessarily have to wait for piles of randomized controlled trials and for all the big societies to tell us what's okay to do if what we're talking about is relatively safe things that are based on mobilizing the body and mind's own natural healing qualities, that are extensions of things we do already and that have been researched and shown to be safe, that have been shown to change the underlying variables that cause all of those symptoms. And fibromyalgia is a great example of that. The common sort of conventional point of view, and this is the way I trained at Harvard Medical School, was, okay, you use these drugs for symptoms, you encourage them to do psychotherapy, and you encourage them to do exercise. And my experience has been that works in a percentage of people, but not a very high percentage of people. And even the earlier research that told us that things like Lyrica were helpful, later research says, well, maybe not so helpful on average on a population. And if it's been helping you, great. But here's the thing about, is fibromyalgia going to get worse? Is it going to be disabling? It depends. It depends on what you do. Why? Because there are underlying biological imbalances that are all connected to each other. So for instance, dysbiosis, leaky gut, inflammation, hormonal changes, lack of restorative sleep, mitochondrial dysfunction, which are where the cellular energy producing organs don't work properly, occult infections that drive inflammation, food sensitivities, whether it be gluten or other things that are activating the immune system, and then potentially most important is autonomic imbalance, where there's a hyperactive hypervigilance and an overactive stress, fight, flight, freeze response, which can be triggered or have been caused by either early life adverse experiences or traumatic or bad illnesses or infections or other difficult things that happen during life. And so all of these variables interact with each other. It's like a snowball that builds and gets bigger as it rolls downhill. That's probably why fibromyalgia gets worse. That's what the research that we have suggests. We don't have data sets big enough to prove that, oh yeah, that's exactly how fibromyalgia works. And we might never. It really depends. There's people are collecting big data and they're doing stuff over time, and it could be that in 10 or 20 or 30 years we actually know definitively with more solid research to prove these principles that many of us are using every day and actually helping people get better. And the question you have to ask is if you want to wait for that, right? So like you've got this problem, you're on a bus called fibromyalgia and it's going down the road towards potentially a place of more pain, more suffering, more symptoms, possibly disability. And then you've got an option to get on a different bus. And on that different bus is relatively safe, common sense things that have been proven to be helpful, proven to be safe, and proven to shift those underlying biological imbalances. And so what are you going to do about that? And so I put some cases in the text of this little video, but I've had lots of them, right? A relatively young person around 20 who was having horrible pain, horrible fatigue and disability, had been sick her whole life, had an autoimmune disease since she was 10. And one of the first things we did was get her off gluten, and like, boom, significant improvement in her pain and fatigue and her overall outlook on things. We started her on LDN, which is low dose naltrexone, which is a very gentle, kind of tricks the body to produce more of its own naturally occurring opioids, endorphins and enkephalins. It's not a habit-forming drug. And that made a huge impact as well. It makes a huge impact on a lot of people with fibromyalgia, but because we don't have huge randomized controlled trials, a lot of docs are scared to use it, even though the parent drug has had tons of research for decades and decades. And so that's one case. There's someone else who I've seen recently, actually, who on her own identified that her own early life stressors and adverse experiences and really high volume stress response was a big part of her fibromyalgia. And she really went to town, really went for it, and like a champion, took on learning techniques to reduce that stress response and heal trauma. And she made on her own such a tremendous improvement in her overall symptoms and her well-being. And only recently came to me and said, okay, what else do we have to do? And in my experience, when that stress response has been going on for decades, you frequently see these other issues like dysbiosis and leaky gut and inflammation and hormonal changes that also need physical metabolic changes, which are nutrition, supplements, things like that. And then another one of my patients who had horrible chronic pain, back pain, knee pain, arthritis, fibromyalgia. And the thing that really did it for her was the right kind of exercise. Because you just go to a gym and you start to work out, you go to an inexperienced physical therapist, and they don't really get what fibromyalgia is, and that what you need is a very gentle, graded exercise, preferably where you're learning to be mindful and aware of your own bodily experience, and preferably where you're actually stimulating your relaxation response, so turning off that reactivity, which can trigger a flare if you do too much exercise. I mean, that's why I developed an online training program that really trains you in mind-body and body-mind tools that help get at a lot of this underlying physiology that drives the symptoms and drives the pain. So, bottom line, does fibromyalgia automatically get worse and make you disabled? Well, it depends on what you do. Despite what conventional medical thinking wants to tell you, that there's no cure, it's going to get worse, just deal with it. That's complete nonsense. Forgive me, I almost want to use a swear word, but I don't like to do that online. It's so frustrating to hear that, because so many people are given this like sentence, like you're stuck, nothing you can do. And then they hear the whole disability thing. And some people do get disabled. But my experience, my perspective is that if you really take it to heart that you can heal, that you can do things to shift your underlying biology, and you start to learn, you start to grow, then you're going to have a transformation and you're going to feel better. You might not be 100% better, but you're going to be out of that, oh my gosh, I'm helpless, I'm suffering, I'm swirling down the drain. And that's the thing that seems so incredibly important. I want you to be able to like reclaim your life, to live, to know that there's potential and possibility, to know that your life is meaningful, that you've got purpose, and you're not just like bouncing off of the whole sickness, illness, pain thing. So wishing you well. Wish you well on your journey. Lots of blessing, lots of healing. And feel free to join my online community and my email community if you'd like. You can go to drschillerlearn.com and you'll get good stuff, guidance and training, science-based integrative medicine that actually works. So thanks so much for watching. And if you like this video, please share it with other people. Take care.